Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all attending the BGS Grassland Farmer of the Year Awards evening. Hugh McClymont speaking here. Strange speaking to a screen, although we've had a year and a half now of virtual meetings as such. But anyway, you're going to get my voice, you'll not see me, but anyway, thank you for those kind introductions from us all. Photograph of me in the centre, holding a 4-leaf clover, I think it is. So whether that was luck or not, I'm not so sure. And also you can see all the other judges who have been introduced. So tonight I'm going to go through a series of slides, photographs that were taken from all 3 farms that were visited as part of this Grassland Farmer of the Year competition 2021. Move on to the map here on slide number 3, and as you can see, farm number 1 we visited on the 1st of September to Mr. Harold Johnston in Northern Ireland in Ballymena, and then a week later we travelled to south, way down and into Devon to Mr. Chris Blake at Appledore Dairy Farm, and then the following day we made it up to Marc Jones in Powys at Trefnant Hall Farm, and we had concluded all 3 visits that were drawn up by the judging panel to warrant the visit for this competition. And that was on the merits that we achieved that brought them to this from their initial submission. So slide number 4 is where we visited Harold Johnston and his family at Ballybollen farm in Ballymena. What a beautiful morning it was when we arrived at Ballybollen farm. We were met by Harold and his wife and 2 sons that were present, Jack and Marc. There's a 3rd son, Richard, and he have joined us later on the visit, and he's a practicing vet in a local veterinary practice. The photograph actually, as Harold explained, is the David Cameron door of the house. So you can see me at the extreme left, and then John Martin, and then members of the family, the Johnston family there. But the David Cameron door, the Right Honourable David Cameron, was our Prime Minister a number of years ago, actually had visited Ballybollen, and he got his photograph taken in the same spot at the house. Slide number 5. And this is now showing some of the details of the farm. Those of you not familiar, 164 hectares, 113 metres above sea level, 273 cows, as you can read, calving late August to early February, so basically an autumn calving herd predominantly. You can see the production from the cows, and photos of the cows grazing on that date on the 1st of September. This was obviously their 2nd grazing. They'd been out the night before and grazed fairly hard at the top right of the corner on the slope. This was quite a sloping field and a dense sward, probably a bit higher reject area down the bottom. I think we came to the opinion that it's probably just due to the location and the amount of nutrients, obviously organic material that had been left behind. Anyway, the cows were in fine fettle, looking well, and this view shows looking back toward Farmstead in the distance. Moving on to slide 6. Here we have on the left hand the photograph here showing the green energy investment on the farm for windmill, and according to Mr. Johnston, it's certainly been a worthwhile investment. With one of the sons here, for me, I can't remember if that's Marc or Jack, but it's one of his. And obviously the lady there's Helen Matthews, you're all well aware who that is. And we'd walked up to that strategic point there, which was on our visit, the highest part of the farm visit that day, and we actually could see considerable distance round the province of Northern Ireland at that given point. The top right hand, this was taken just as we were walking towards to see the grazing cows in the morning. We were walking out over a recently mowed and baled field of grass, and en route to see the cows. Described the cows in production earlier, but the bottom photograph here was something that didn't quite to us all. You can see the left hand of that photograph was the cover over the slurry store. This was seen by the Johnston family as a huge investment. It was granted, but certainly keeps a lot of rainwater out, and being in Northern Ireland, it's a reputation for high rainfall, so that has reduced the issue of unnecessary rainwater, and obviously increasing the value due to the dilution factor, obviously, of the farm produced slurry. The building in front here is occupied on a very bright sunny day, but this is dry cow management. These are late, very pregnant cows being fed a diet, high fibre diet, and quite a lot of rye whole crop being fed here in the diet. And as the cows were being closely monitored by cameras, CCTV cameras, they were quite easily slipped to the right of the yolks in this photograph here into straw pens, where they would be calving down. And again, the lane, this is a opposite viewpoint from looking from the windmill or the wind turbine, looking back towards the farm, and you can see the stone track which is used by vehicular traffic and as well as cow traffic. And as you can see, electric fencing either side to aid the direction of cows. Top right hand figure described obviously the rationale behind the cover of the store, and I think this is something that we're all going to do on livestock units going forward, is covered stores. It keeps rainfall out, as I said earlier, but again this keeps, when you're mixing slurry, the emissions lower from the ammonia released when you start moving slurry around in the stores, which helps in form of the Clean Air Act that's coming our way. So I think full marks to Harold and his family for certainly investing in that. This is something that we're going to see going forward when you've got large numbers of stock producing over a period, and it's not only as a complete NVZ, obviously there is restrictions for times, so a lengthy storage requirement there, so that helps in that direction. And again, in the bottom right slide, you can see now the cows again grazing, looking back towards the farmsteading, and the judges giving Harold Johnston quite a grilling, but it was quite amiable, but it was certainly excellent dialogue from all three members of the family there when Harold and the two lads, Marc and Jack, were present. And here we have, again, just adjacent to the steading, a recently ploughed, cultivated and reseeded grass sward there, and it only been done a few days prior to our visit. And that's right behind the dry cow shed. So this brings me on now to farm number 2, and here we have our host farmer, Mr. Chris Blake, and his wife Erin, who's originally from New Zealand. They met when Chris visited New Zealand whilst he was studying at Appledore University College. They now they're married and they have 3 young family. So that's outside the family house on Appledore Dairy Farm in Crediton in Devon. Moving on to slide 10, tells you a bit about the farm details. We'll come to the photograph in a minute. The farm details, 530 hectares. Altitude, again, not that high, but above sea level. But working with a distinctive breed here now that Chris has been instrumental in changing the breeding, and he's working with Irish New Zealand genetics, Holstein cows, and working a purely autumn calving block and producing production figures, as you can see, 8,200, but very impressive figures for milk from forage, and still feeding some concentrates. But we were privy to the financial data from the farm and returning quite a decent margin from his system. So much so that that has allowed Chris and his wife and the directors of the company to, in 2020, to purchase another farm about 10 miles away, which was a sheep and beef farm, and it's now converted that to a dairy farm. And a lot of that success is based on his farming, changing his breeding pattern from his cows and utilising more from graze grass. The field, as you can see, actually happens to show one species to the bottom left there, which would be dock, but it's a group of cows grazing. These were freshly calved cows that were just been put. This was quite close to the dairy unit, and these were just under supervision before they joined the main herd. So not probably the best looking at grazing, but as you can see, that's why they were there, and the flexibility of the electric fence. So I'm going to move on to now slide number 11, and I'll start the top left hand corner. And as he was just at this here on the 8th of September, just a bit of a start, certainly started calving in early August, so there's a number of calves on the ground. These were a pen off, dare I say, a Holstein sexed from sex semen, all female, and looked in tremendous form, these calves, and being fed from the milk bar. And yes, I think your eyes are judge here. These calves were well presented for us on arrival that day, but all looking well, and a fairly unique system for everyone who was involved with calving and how much milk they got. But as you can see, they were certainly looking tremendous that day. Move down to the bottom left. I'll do the smaller photographs first. And this was us on our way out through the track, for cow track, to get to where the cows were away in the far distance, the number of cows that was there. And we just experienced a very heavy shower, so there was a lot of moisture lying around. But grass was in abundance on the 8th of September. And this one on the right was actually into the afternoon. This was just after 2:30. Cows were being brought home for the afternoon milking. And again, a fantastic group of cows, mobility fantastic, walking along the cow track, heading back to the milking facility back at the farm steading. The recent investment, and I think there's a better photograph coming up, and I'll talk about it now, but it's the underpass where the cows are crossing underneath a main road that was leading up to a local hotel. I'll move on to the slide number 12. Yeah, clover in abundance in this photograph here. Quite a lot of clover on this farm, and it was interesting to see it. This is where the cows had been grazing. They've been moved away from milking. As you can see, the depth of cover was present, and the fence had been dropped to give them the next section. This was all being monitored and measured by Chris and his team. Interestingly, his team consisted of a very young lad who was on an apprenticeship, and it was good to see that encouragement there to try and bring in the next generation of dairy farmers, because it's going to become increasingly difficult to get people now into this industry. The top right showed the milk handling facility for feeding the calves. That was pulled behind the gator, or UTV, whatever you want to call it, and milk was pumped in, measured through a pumping system. It's a New Zealand piece of kit, but that allows you could actually feed that milk to that out in a field, but Chris has it adapted so that he can pump into his milk bars in the barn. And the bottom right showed up again, as I said, we experienced one very heavy shower, so we did look a bit wet. In fact, that's been a bit mild, we were probably soaked. But you can see pulling of water on the cow track. But this section of the track had been laid with concrete, and some of it was compacted stone, but this was actually had been concreted. And again, we're looking towards more grass and being explained by Chris the whole methodology of how he runs around his grazing platform. There is a video, and it just shows the cows being gathered from that paddock where they've been grazing in the morning. They're coming into the afternoon, and the young lad is on the gator away in the distance, or UTV, and bringing the cows in, letting the cows come in on a gentle stroll back to milking parlour. You can see a vehicle about to pass over the underpass, and that vehicle's heading up to a very fancy boutique hotel where they do lots of weddings, and this is something that Chris had embarked on, to invest in the infrastructure to get the cows away from crossing that road, so it didn't create any issues for the vehicular traffic going to this local hotel. You can see a bit of the topography of the land here, sloping land, but in good form. Grass had obviously started growing in abundance, but they'd suffered quite a bit during the summer period with dry weather. Finally, this slide here now, slide 14, takes us to Marc Jones at Trefnant Hall near Welshpool. Again, as you can see, the assembled company in this photograph. Marc is in the centre next to my left with his wife, Mrs. Jones, and Marc's father, David, who has now partially stood back to let Marc run the farm, but Father David takes his instructions from Marc, and majority of the time I think he does adhere to those instructions, but they seem to be quite a formidable team of father and son, and it's great to see father allowing the son to fly the direction of the farm business in a different direction from where he'd started and showed him. But anyway, Marc's wife, unfortunately I can't remember her name, her Christian name at this point, but she has a diversified business here for on-farm accommodation, and she's also a lecturer to a local college in agriculture in Wales, so quite a diverse business team there. Moving on to slide number 15, some of the farm facts. 500 acres, over 200 hectares, and again much steeper and much higher than previous farms visited on this competition. And again, telling you a bit about the animals that's on. These are all brought onto the farm at certain ages as calves and reared through, as you can see, to a finishing weight, and at a very respectable time, and going on to a designated aligned contract. The sheep flock, which we did visit, also, yes, performing extremely well on a rotationally grazed management system. So, as you can see, the photograph, camera never lies. These animals are in great fettle and an abundance of grass in front of them at the moment, but the next day or two, due to the rotational grazing, they will be moving onwards. Here we have a bit of serious debate between the two farmer judges. John Martin listened intensively to Marc, talking about his grassland management, but more importantly, we were trying to explain about the fodder beat to the rear of us, behind us. And this is where one of the many fields that Marc has in Fodderbeat for outwintering of cattle on Fodderbeat, and how he places it and manages that to minimise runoff from outwintering, but more importantly to get the best benefit from grazing off in situ Fodderbeat there. So very intense, that photograph, Marc ably describing the use of his hands. I don't know if that was the size of Fodderbeat he was talking about, but anyway, you can see this, the debate that was going on, and this was, I suppose, very similar throughout all three farms visited. Very good debate from the host farmers. On the right, extreme right, top right, you can see the topography much more different here now in Wales. Yes, gently rolling hills, but could be rather steep, and that there just shows the farm buildings looking down into that particular field where we visited with the Aberdeen Angus cattle, and you can see the sort of steep incline there of the banking where the farm steading sits at the very top there. But what a view you have of the valley from the house. And again, what you could see when we visited in the 9th of September, where Marc's attention to detail, his fields looked extremely green, and a lot of the neighbouring land had suffered from a dry summer, and they were still recovering, and much brown, as in still recovering, and a long way to go. So Marc's farming methods was ably described there. A recent investment, the Adequate handling system, to streamline handling cattle, weighing cattle, so that it could become a one-man operation. And this was, Marc was quite keen to show that to the visiting judges. Moving on to slide 17 here. And again, this was another group of cattle behind an electric fence. A mixture of some black and white steers there. They had come onto the farm, and I'm not sure Marc was a fan of them, but anyway, it was part of the deal. But anyway, they were all growing because he'd been monitoring weights as such. And again, the fence was just about ready for shifting due to the covers being taken off by this grazing group of cattle. Bottom left, a better example of the fodder beat that was sitting waiting for this autumn-winter grazing in situ. And here we have the ewes. They weren't meant to be in that particular part of the field, but unfortunately they had decided to come through. Somebody had left the gate open, and they'd all managed to get through. They had been grazing that higher, a bit poorer pasture, but they came through here. But these were some of the Romney ewes as such on the farm. Marc had spent a considerable bit of time in New Zealand and had sort of adopted a lot of the practices from there, and they came back with these ideas of changing sheep flock, but more importantly looking at rotational grazing, not only of cattle but also of sheep. So ladies and gents, that concludes my overview of our visits to the three respective farms. A very interesting 3 days spent, a lot of miles were covered, but excellent dialogue between the judging panel and the host farmers. So I cannot say anything more than that. Thank you very much for the intense scrutiny you had to put up with from our panel, and I just would like to thank you all kindly for allowing us to come on in these strange times, and for the hospitality offered on certain farms. In fact, all farms offered hospitality, which was nice. But it was great to get back out on farm and speak to people and look them in the eye, and it was very rewarding. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think the panel all did too. So at this point, I am now going to stop this recording and then hand back to our chairman tonight. Thank you.